Hello, and welcome to Advocates for Children Back to School webinar. We'll be getting started in just a minute, and we'll just let people amble in. And my name is Liliana Diaz-Pedrosa. I am here with Maggie Moroff. We are going to be taking turns presenting the information today, and while we wait, we wanted to launch our first poll to see who you are, and then shortly thereafter, where you are coming from. During the presentation, you're going to notice that you have the possibility of captions. If you are interested in viewing the captions, please look at the bottom of your screen to activate them so that you can read as we speak. The captions are auto-generated, so there may be some little glitches here and there, but we should be okay. All right, we should, Isabella, if you could launch the first poll. Thank you. You should be seeing the first poll. Now, if you're joining us just now, remember we are in the Back to School webinar for Advocates for Children, what we know so far. And we will soon be going into our presentation overview and everything else. We're just letting people get settled. Again, my name is Liliana Diaz-Pedrosa, and I will be joined by Maggie Moroff, and also Isabella Reiki and Kim Madden, who you will not be seeing, but you will be probably communicating with through the Q&A and just background. All right, when this poll is over, we'll launch into the second poll. Oh, and it looks like most of you are parents. Welcome, parents. I'm sure you're a little bit nervous about the start of the new year. So are we. So you are in good company, or we are in great company. There's a few of you who are educators as well. Welcome. We can't wait to take your questions. You'll notice that there is a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions, please go ahead and write them in. If you are, for one reason or another, unable to write a question, just say that you want to speak a question out loud. You can also let us know. We will have opportunities for that later on as the time comes up. We would prefer if you could type up the questions so that we can answer them. Let's launch the second poll and then we'll get started. So where are you coming from today? See which boroughs are represented. Maybe today we'll have somebody from Staten Island. Maybe not. And while we wait for the poll, Isabella, would it be possible to go to the second slide for the overview? Thank you. So today for the back to school, we're going to be discussing the My Student NYC account, where you are going to be finding most access to information, safety in school, remote options, busing, before we go into special education placement, IEP class services, and the new Department of Education recovery programs, as well as final ending with resolving problems. Let's see where you guys are coming from. Oh, nobody from Staten Island. I'm disappointed, Staten Island, yet again, but we love you. And we have a pretty good representation from all the other boroughs, with Brooklyn leading the way, followed by Queens and Manhattan and the Bronx equal representation. Now, for those of you who are other, I'm assuming you're from out of town, welcome. Let's get started. All right, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, let's tell you a little bit more about Advocates for Children. For those of you who have never worked with Advocates for Children before, we are an independent agency. We protect the rights of all New York City students. We are now on our 50th year, and we provide a number of free services for New York City public school students. Our services include our helpline, which is a free information line that runs 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, from 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. You can see the number listed there, but I will drop it later in the Q&A so that you can have it. We have tons of guides and resources on our website, advocatesforchildren.org. We provide free workshops and trainings, usually on-site, live, in person, but for the time being remotely. And then free legal services to low-income families or families of low income, particularly around issues of education. So things like special education, accessing schools, where do I go to school, how do I apply, language access needs, etc. We provide information, free information and services to families who live in New York City, receive the services from the New York City Department of Education. The bottom line is, if you have questions around education, give us a call. We'll be happy to help. Let's go to the next slide. You can check for updates on our website, again, advocatesforchildren.org. We should have information as we receive it for the new school year. And just contact us there. You can also go to our to YouTube. We have a YouTube page where you will find archived webinars on different subjects, from turning 5 to graduation options to changes in the promotional policy, things that may be relevant to you. So similar to what we're doing today, but on other topics. Now, today, before we get started, let's go to the next slide, please. And we wanted to give you a brief summary of some of the issues they're going to be discussing today. So as you know, the Department of Education has announced that they will have an all in-person option. There will be no remote option, although we will speak later about home instruction and homeschooling. You can anticipate that the bulk of instruction this year is going to be live in person. We're going to be discussing vaccines and testing and the question marks that there are around that. Busing routes, how you can find it in My Students or by calling the school. We're going to be discussing COVID mitigation strategies that the Department of Education has announced. So no social distancing on buses, no vaccine requirements, but masks have to be worn in the bus. And of course, yes, in the school, there will be mask breaks, of course, and we will discuss that as well. For meals in schools, the New York City Department of Education will again provide free meals for all students in school, which is something that everyone should be interested in. Excuse me, I'm being interrupted. No. Okay. So I think, Maggie, this is your turn now.
Yep.
For mystudent.nyc.
Okay, great. So hi, everybody. I'm Maggie Moroff. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about mystudent.nyc, which is the place that you're now going to get most of the information you need about your student. First, we're going to just sort of take a look at what the site looks like, and then we're going to discuss how to actually create an account if you haven't done that yet. What you're seeing right now is the landing page that comes up when you first log on, and then you're going to click on, you can see over here on the left, there's a picture of an outline of a student that's been blacked out. You would be clicking on right there. Can we go to the next then, please? Great. So this is what happens once you are on the site. There's a lot of information on here. The DOE is continuing to add information. A lot of this couldn't be got online before, but the 3 sections that are most relevant to the beginning of the school year are the 3 we've circled here: the IEP section, the transportation section, and the enrollment section. And you're going to want to take a look at all 3 of those. The IEP section should list all of the services and the programs that your student or the student that you're working with is entitled to under their IEP. All the supports and services except for transportation, which has a window of its own. So that's the next circle down there, down the middle column. That's where you're going to look to make sure you're going to get information about the bus company that your student has been assigned to, what the route looks like. You're also going to be able to get information there about accommodations on the bus, what's listed on the IP, and you want to make sure that they are there on the transportation section as well. We'll talk a little bit more about transportation in a bit. And then you probably want to look at enrollment also to confirm that your student is in fact going to the school that you believe that they're going to, and that the DOE has the right information there. That's going to have current and past information, so take a look at that as well. I would also suggest that you click on the other boxes and look at them. There's a lot of information in there to be had, and keep going back over the year. Next. think we missed a slide. One more back. Huh.
All right.
Bear with us, guys. Isabella, we're looking for slide number 9 to create an account.
Yes.
Sorry, team, having some technical difficulties. Give us 1 second.
Yeah.
And while we wait, there is a question that just came in. And I think we will probably reply to this later, but since we have a little bit of time. Says last year, my daughter received speech through teletherapy and her sets remotely as well. She attends private school. This year, I would like her services to be done remotely again, but was told that it's only possible if she's remote. And she wants to know if it's possible for her to receive remote teletherapies while her daughter is attending in-person private school. I think that there was recently, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to offer to take that one, Lillian.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have been checking in with the Department of Education on all of the questions that we're covering today. And this is one, as long as parents have documentation and apply, students can both receive their therapy remotely and get their assessments done remotely. You need to have your paperwork in as required, but that it is a possibility. And I believe, although I think we might want to confirm that it's possible to do the therapy remotely, even if the student is attending school during the day in person.
Yeah, what they said on that, hi, this is Kim Madden. What they said on that is that if you're getting vouchers, so if you're getting an RSA or a SETS voucher, so then they can do it remotely. I think you could ask in other circumstances. We're just not as clear on the answer yet.
All right, I think we're back on live. Thank you, Isabella, for finding the slide. And let's see if this works. Yep, we're back.
Awesome. Okay, so as I said, you wanted to look at your My Student account. To get there, you have to set it up. All students in the public schools have access to this. In the non-public schools, there's also access. You're going to follow the directions on there's a DOE flyer, and I think we're going to drop the link for that into the chat or into the Q&A. But basically, you're going to look at that flyer. You can get to that online also if you search accessing my student account. You can go directly to the website. So www.myschools.nyc, and then you can do that there in English or in Spanish. There are 3 ways that students can get their account started. They can visit their, if they don't have the code that they need. Let me back up. You will need a creation code in order to start your account if you haven't done that. Those were sent home last spring. If you still have the letter, then use that creation code. If you don't, you can get it from your school. You can either go in person to the school to get it, or you can contact your child's school, verify who you are, probably through a teleconference, and then they're going to give you a temporary password. Or as I said, you can use the code that you were sent last year. You want to set that up. You want to go online and get it set up. It's pretty easy, I understand, to follow the links. My children are out of school age, so I haven't actually set my own up at this point. But the flyer details, the flyer in the yellow bar up there, details all 3 of the ways that I just laid out. While we're on this page, we also just wanted to say that a good way to communicate with your school, it's not really exactly on this point, but a really good way to communicate with your school is by email. So everything is moving online at this point. If you are watching today's webinar, it means that you're online and you have that capability. We know that there are folks for whom that is a greater challenge, and there are ways to work with that as well. But I think that you're going to find that to the extent that you can communicate and get logged onto this site online, things are going to move that much smoother. All right, we want to stop here and see if people have questions about what we've talking about, what we've spoken about so far. I see a lot of questions coming up about things that we're planning on talking about too. So this is a really, it's a good lively conversation. Questions about this?
And I wanted to add, we just dropped the links to the Department of Education's flyer that Maggie had referred to in the chat box, so you guys can copy it, and also a link to where to get started with the My Schools account if you haven't already. So look in the chat box. Although you cannot send stuff to us, we can send things to you, and hopefully you can capture that information there. Let us know in the Q&A if you are not able to do that. For the time being, Maggie, it doesn't look like we have any questions that are about this topic. We promise that we're going to get into transportation just now. We'll talk about school environment in just a second as well. So maybe you can go on.
Okay, great. So we want to talk a little bit more about the transportation, right? So when you click on that box that said transportation on your My Schools page, this is what's going to pop up. This has been blacked out because it's a real student, but you want to take a look. You want to confirm the school. You want to confirm that the transportation accommodations that are listed on your student's IEP are laid out there. You want to check and make sure that any vehicle modifications are there. You want to make sure that your address is right. You want to take a look then and make sure that the school contact is there and reach out to them if you need. And this is where you're going to get the information that you need. If you look at the bottom half of the screen, there's the bus company information. There's the bus company number. You want to call the bus company as well and check in with them if your student has accommodations or vehicle modifications, and make sure that they're going to be able to offer those modifications and accommodations. But this is what it's going to look like. You're not going to get a letter as you have in past years. You're going to access the information here. We're going to talk in a second about what to do if you're having trouble accessing this. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. Sorry, I guess I kind of said most of this already, right? But on that last page, you can get the route number and the bus company. If you can't access that, how do you get the route number and the bus company? You can call your school. They're the ones that are going to be able to give you that information. If you have problems like the accommodations or the modifications, or something that is on your IEP isn't listed, or the bus company says that they're not going to be able to provide it, then you want to call OPT. You want to call their customer service line. It's shifted from previous years. It's now a part of P311. So you're going to call the number that's here on the screen. They cannot give you routing information. This is where you're going to call to make a complaint if you have concerns, as I said, with modifications and accommodations. We have been talking to the Office of Pupil Transportation. This call line is really, it's being used by a lot of people right now, and the volume is pretty high. So they are looking at other ways that families may be able to file a complaint. I just lost all my notes on my computer, so hopefully I'm going to tell you all everything I want to. We will update people as we have more information about other ways to get through to OPT. So for questions about your route, if you're not on your My Student page, you want to check in with your school. For concerns about your route or the modifications or the accommodations, you want to call OPT's helpline. Let's keep going. Okay, we wanted to talk to you a little bit here about vaccines, masks, and screening. Having so many technical difficulties today, folks. All school-based staff, so that includes teachers and service providers and school security agents and office staff, are required to vaccinate. They need to have received their first of their vaccines, even if they need to, by September 27th. So they may not be yet, but they will be. Bus staff who are on different contracts are not required to vaccinate, but they are required to mask up on the buses. The DOE is encouraging vaccination for all students over 12 years old. And in fact, they're setting up vaccination sites at middle and upper school and high schools. Like last year, families and staff, students and staff are going to be asked to complete a daily health screening form, questions about exposure and about how you feel. Like last year, the DOE is asking families and students and staff to stay home and test if they are not feeling well. A lot of the COVID symptoms can look like other symptoms, so there's a lot of confusion. Don't do what we used to do, which is sort of power through, but stay home, keep your students home. Face masks are required on buses, and that goes for students and staff, unless the students have medical exemptions. So if there is a reason because of the student's health or because of their disability, they can apply for a medical exemption. And that applies both on the buses and in the schools. And then the last thing that we wanted to mention on this slide is that the DOE has said that they're going to give students something called mask breaks, where they will be in less crowded places during meals, obviously, where they can take off their masks and do a little bit more deep breathing. Around meals, obviously, students will not be wearing their masks when they do that. Schools are looking at different ways, and it's going to look different at every school to give students more space while they are eating. They're going to be using staggered schedules. They're going to be using non-traditional rooms for students to eat in, all ways to give the students and the staff a little more space when the masks come down so that the students can have their meals. Okay, great. Physical distancing. CDC recommends at least 3 feet between people in schools, if possible. If possible is kind of key here. A lot of our schools are crowded. There are other efforts around reducing class sizes and reducing overall school populations. If a school is crowded now and it's not possible to give those 3 feet, that's not going to happen. Also, for some of the students with disabilities, there's a need to have another person closer than 3 feet to help support the student. There isn't, buses are a trouble spot for a lot of our families. We know there's no physical distancing required on buses right now. If there is space, they will spread the students out. If there's not, they're going to be sitting next to somebody or across the row from somebody. So masks, if students can wear them, are really important there. In elementary schools, the Department of Ed has said that students are going to stay with the same group as much as possible. So they'll stay with a cohort, and the different teachers for the different subjects will come to them. So there's not as much movement. Also staggered schedules and the use of extra non-typical spaces we talked about on the last slide, but schools are really being encouraged and required to look at ways to give more distance for the students while they are in the schools to keep them as safe as possible. All right, testing, which we know people have a lot of questions about. Students, if they're over 12 years old, have the opportunity to vaccinate. If they are not vaccinated, and they will have to demonstrate that they have been vaccinated, if their families consent to having them tested periodically, they will be, just like last year, although a little bit less frequently. Families need to consent to that periodic testing. All staff, as I said before, are required to be vaccinated, and they need to have received their first dose by September 27th. They will be tested until they are fully vaccinated. So not just until the 27th, but until the full 2 weeks after their second vaccination. What happens if there's a positive case? It's going to look different depending on the age and the school level. For elementary students, because those students are less than 12 years old, if there's a positive case, all students in the class where there was a positive case are going to be required to quarantine for 10 days. They will get live synchronous instruction during that time, so it will look a lot like last year. For middle school and high school, for those students who are vaccinated, if they have no symptoms, even if somebody else has tested positive in their class, they're going to be allowed to remain in school. If they have symptoms and they haven't been vaccinated, just like with elementary students, they're going to be required to quarantine. If they have no symptoms, they do have the option of going and getting a test, and then as soon as they get the results back, they can get the test on day 5 and they can go back on day 7, assuming the test is negative. They will also have access to remote instruction and what the DOE is calling office hours. This third bar, what happens if there's more than one case in the schools? We don't know. The city has said that they haven't said yet when they will be closing schools, how many cases it will take, how many classrooms it will require. We are watching for that. I know a lot of you are too. As we said before, as we get new information, we are going to share it. One of the things that AFC does every year is put out a fact sheet on the start of the school year for students with disabilities. We're going to put out a current version now. We're still waiting for some information in that. That's going to be a really good place. If you check with us online on that fact sheet, as we get new information, we're going to keep adding it. Okay, medically necessary home instruction. This is for students who need to learn remotely because of medical needs. So for those students who can't attend school because of their medical needs, there is an option of getting their educational services outside of the schools. Those services are going to come from certified teachers in the student's home or from individual and small group remote instruction. Home instruction, which is being relabeled a little bit now to include a greater number of needs, has been around for a long time. Students who, for whatever reason, were unable medically to attend school had the option of home instruction. It is not an all-day, everyday thing. For students in elementary school, it's about an hour a day. For students in middle school and high school, it's 2 hours a day. But what is new this year because of COVID is that students with a number of conditions are automatically going to be approved for home instruction. I had another computer screen open where I had that list, and for some reason it shut down on me. But if you go to that link just below the sort of the red new and important sign, you can get that list. That is not an all-inclusive list. There are other students who might, for medical reasons, also apply for and be approved for home instruction. So we encourage, and I've heard the DOE encourage, that families who don't have one of those listed conditions still apply. I also wanted to share that we've been told today that they are updating the list a little bit to include students with psychological needs on that list of automatic approvals. So take a look at the list. Even if your child has one of those conditions, you still need to actually apply. It just means that they will be automatically approved with those. Everyone else also will apply, and then it'll be a case-by-case determination. Probably a good place for us to stop again and give you guys a chance to check in with us.
Let's see if there's any open ones, Maggie.
Yeah.
So there is a question about, I'll read the question. Given that COVID-19 is airborne, I am concerned about ventilation in schools, especially considering the highly contagious Delta variant. Don't forget Mu. And the fact that children under age 12 are not eligible for the vaccine. I wonder if you have information on any steps the Department of Education is taking to monitor airflow patterns in classrooms and ensure safe direction of airflow. I'll say to this, we're not really quite sure about the specific ways that the Department of Education is going to try to monitor air quality and other specific mitigation strategies. This might be one where you want to reach out to the specific school to see what their safety plan may be or how they are planning on ensuring consistency with what the Department of Education is requiring. And I guess that's as much as I can tell you.
Yeah.
I wish there could be something more. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we are education experts, education rights experts. Not even we're not educators. We are not health experts. So, as much as we would love to be able to answer this, I think there are other people that are much more qualified than we on this one.
I agree with that. I think we don't have anything more. Let's continue with the next slide, which I think is me. All right, so let's talk about, this part will mostly focus on special education and placement. So what happens if you have a child who receives special education services, and at this point, there is no placement? Let's start with preschool. For students who receive related services only, so occupational therapy, counseling, and other services, you should contact your Office of Enrollment or email esenrollment@schools.nysc.gov. Let me just make sure that I put this in the chat really quickly, and you can get that information. The Committee on Preschool Special Education is going to arrange for CED and other related services to serve your child based on what's recommended on the IEP, but it will not arrange placement for children who are recommended for general education classes in early childhood programs or daycare settings. So if you have a child who has been recommended to receive general education placement and related services in preschool, you are going to find your own early childhood program, your daycare setting, and the Department of Education then is responsible for offering the related services and the CED and for arranging those services. However, if your child has a recommendation for a placement in a special class, a class that is self-contained where all students have disabilities, or a special class in an integrated setting, a class where some students have disabilities and others do not, you should contact the CPSC, the Committee on Preschool Special Education for the district where you live, to then find out what placement offers they might have. And I'm just sending a listing of where you can find the Committee on Special Education. Okay. All right. Now, if you are receiving special education services, you have no placement, and you're between kindergarten through 8th grade. Again, if you have a child who has a recommendation for related services, an integrated co-teaching class, which is this hybrid class that is a class that is considered general education, where some students who have disabilities also are mandated to be in that smaller type of classroom setting, or a specialized class in a community school, you should go to, if you went through the kindergarten or middle school admissions process, you should go to the school that was offered during the middle school and kindergarten admissions process in the spring. If you're dissatisfied with those options, this is your community school, and you want more options, you can always go and request, speak about placement at the Family Welcome Center. And the way to get to the Family Welcome Center is by requesting an appointment. And I just dropped the appointment form online. So you go to the Family Welcome Center, and then you explain why it is that you want to meet, and they should get back to you for more options. If you have a child who has been recommended for a District 75 program, which is a highly specialized Department of Education district that offers all self-contained, all special education classroom that offer specialized services and supports for children who are recommended to be in those programs. You should have received something that's called a prior written notice or a school location letter. And these are notices that tell you where the Department of Education believes that they have a school classroom that can implement the IEP that lays out all the services that your child is supposed to get for this school year. If you did not get a school location letter or a prior written notice, and you still don't know where your District 75 recommended student is going to go, you should then, or you believe that the recommended placement is not appropriate, you can email d75info@schools.nysc.gov, or you can call the number I'm going to drop again on the chat box and ask for your borough placement officer to discuss placement options. And it might feel that it's a little bit late in the year to do that, but it isn't. So school hasn't started. You're not the only one who might be experiencing some difficulties with placement at this point. You would be surprised about how many people are still trying to figure out what the proper appropriate placement is for their children. So please, if you have questions about this, consider doing so right away because there is still time. All right, let's talk about high school. Now, if your child receives special education services and you have no placement and you're high school bound, again, for children who are recommended to receive related services or an integrated co-teaching class or a special class in a community school, you should be attending the school where they received an offer last spring. If you moved from your previous residence or you want other options, again, you can reach out to the Family Welcome Center. Now, generally, a child loses the right to stay in high school at the end of the year in which they turn 21. So if your child turned 21 during the last school year, they can no longer attend a New York City public school, except because of COVID, there has been an extension to that time. So if your child turned 21 before June 30th, 2021, which is the last day of the last school year, they can stay or return to school. So if you're interested in your child continuing their education to finish their high school program, call your last school and tell them that you're interested in returning this fall. And again, if you have problems with this, please contact us. We'll be happy to help. For the students who are high school bound and have been recommended for a District 75 program, the same as what I mentioned before, you should have received a prior written notice or a school location letter that tells you where the Department of Education thinks that there is a classroom. So it has an address, it has a phone number, it tells you your child has been recommended to attend ABC school, which is in somewhere in Queens with the specific address, right? If you did not receive that, or again, if you're dissatisfied with the option that you received, please contact District 75 info at schools.nyc.gov or contact the placement, the borough place, that phone number I just gave you and ask for the borough placement officer. Now, what happened if you weren't in school last year? If you're in New York City, contact your last school and let them know that you're interested in returning. If you've gone through a transition process, you were in middle school and now you are high school bound, and you do not have a placement, then contact your Family Welcome Center because you're not returning presumably to the 8th grade. So if you're in one of those transition points, but if you're not in a transition point, then you can continue in your last school, contact your last school for options. If you're new to your New York City and have a prior IEP from another district, you should provide your IEP to a number of different places. You can contact the Committee on Special Education. You can also go to the Family Welcome Center with this information. The Department of Education is required to offer you something that's called the Comparable Service Plan, which is sort of like a translation of the IEP from the district of where you live to an IEP that New York City can implement. So they're going to try to look and see how can we offer you the most similar services as to what you had before here, and then continue with the process of evaluation and creation of IEP to be able to offer you a full New York City Department of Education program. But you're not supposed to be left without an IEP. You're not supposed to be left without services while this transition is happening. So that's why they create a comparable services plan. Okay, and then they need to implement it. Now, if your child needs a specialized setting, depending on their age, you're going to be contacting the Committee on Preschool Special Education. You can also contact your zoned or assigned school, and this is a school that you belong to by virtue of where you live. So it's just assigned to serve the area where you reside. You can contact the Family Welcome Center for all students, or the Committee on Special Education if you need specialized supports for for the time being. Let me see if I dropped everything. I think we can go to the next slide. This is another place for questions. We really like your questions and we love getting questions. So
They're
please-
helpful.
They're really helpful. And they're very good, the ones that you've presented. So we really encourage you to just ask as many questions as you have, even if you think we're going to answer them later. Okay.
All right,
I
let's
guess we
keep
can go
going
on.
then.
Yeah. And I think this is you. Go ahead.
I will pick it up from here. We want to talk to you guys. Much of what we're talking, or some of what we're talking about today applies to all students. Much of what we're talking about today applies specifically to students with disabilities. Under the New York City Academic Recovery Plan, the Department of Ed has announced that they will be offering opportunities to students with IEPs, an opportunity for recovery services. Those are going to happen after school on Saturdays. It's up to individual schools to figure out what makes the most sense given their student body, their professional body, their building, any number of things. They're going to have flexibility to figure it out looking at everybody. These are meant to make up for the losses in learning that happened for all students due to COVID, when the schools weren't able to provide supports and services. So to really sort of look at it with an eye towards that. It's going to be starting sometime in the fall, not next Monday with the start of the school year, but probably in November. We are still awaiting details. I feel like I keep getting the slides that say we'll get back to you later with more information, but we absolutely will. Before we move on, the department is also going to be offering SEED programs, and SEED stands for Sensory Education, Exploration, and Discovery. Those are for students with disabilities. Those will likely be Saturday programs, and they will be not necessarily in the school buildings where your children go to school currently, or will starting next week, but they'll be in each borough and around each borough, and the department will be making known where those are, how students can look into them. Schools have been charged with looking at all of their students with IEPs and figuring out how to offer these services to students, figuring out what they're going to offer, and then notifying the students and their families of the options. Can we go to the next slide? This is really, really important, right? So the recovery plan, which I just talked about, is to make up for delays and omissions due to COVID that all students experienced. They're being offered on weekends and after school. They are being run by the schools. And as I said, we're still waiting for details on them. This is different than compensatory services. Under law, all students with IEPs have a right to receive compensatory services to make up for the supports and services that were not provided to them, and that kept them from making progress in school and from meeting their IEP goals, the goals that are laid out on their individualized education programs. For the recovery services are going to be offered to all. The compensatory services are something that parents are going to have to ask for. We're still waiting for more information from the DOE about how this is going to work. But what compensatory services can look like is different for every student based on what they are being compensated for. They may involve private providers, services during the school day, services after the school day. Some of those comp services may be delivered during the recovery plan hours, but it's going to look different. Some families may end up bringing due process complaints in order to ensure that their students get the compensatory services that they believe they need. Everybody is still figuring this out and walking this sort of fine line of figuring out the difference right now. We are recommending to families that if they agree that recovery services for their child make sense, and they believe that their child needs compensatory services, accepting the recovery services doesn't prevent the families or the children from asking for compensatory services. So as advocates, we're urging you guys to start a conversation about that sooner rather than later with your relevant school staff. And in accepting recovery services, you can write it down on your on the piece of paper. Yes, I accept, and I'm going to be seeking comp services. You can do it in another letter, but make your thoughts known about this sooner rather than later. All right, I think it goes back to Liliana here.
Comes back to me. Hello again. So language access rights. So parents have the right to get documents, translation, including report cards and IEPs. Let me just back up 1 second. I started reading a little quickly. All public school parents whose primary language is not English have a right to translation and interpretation services provided by the New York City Department of Education. Even if their child is not identified as an English language learner, the parent has the right to request translation and interpretation services. And that means the right to get documents translated, including report cards and IEPs, interpretation services at school meetings and events provided by the Department of Education and provided for free by the Department of Education. You should not be told that you need to bring your own translator or that your child should interpret for you. Interpreters should be impartial or neutral. So not necessarily people that you are working with at the school, but people who actually are, functionally there to interpret. The Department of Education has access to a language line, which is a phone conference if there is no actual in-person interpreter available for you during the meetings. Now, the Department of Education, hold on, let me just put if there's a problem with translation and interpretation. The Department of Education has a number of covered languages, which means that these are languages where the Department of Education must have documents available for parents to use. These are the 8 or 9 high incidence languages in New York City, but they may use other means to translate documents into other languages. So we know Spanish, French, Arabic, Chinese, Bengali, Urdu, Russian, Korean, and Haitian Creole. If the language that the family, your family or the family that you're working with speaks is not one of these, it doesn't mean that you're not entitled to the translation and interpretation services. It just means that they're not pre-made and ready available for you. But you are entitled to that. If you have problems with translation or interpretation, you can email hello@schools.nyc.gov or call the New York City Department of Education complaint line. And I just dropped it in the wrong place. Let me just do it again for everyone. Now everyone should be able to see it. Okay. I think the next one is Maggie, back at you with dispute resolution.
Back to me. So we are talking to you about all the things that should be and giving you all the answers that we have so far. Some of you are here because you know that not everything goes as you need it to go in order to support your child. So short of due process of litigation, we want to talk to you about sort of where do you go? Who do you turn to when things are not going as they should as the school year gets up and running? So we want you to start with your school. We and the DOE want you to start with your schools, right? Look for the parent coordinator, talk to the principal, go to the main office if you don't know the players and ask them who these people are. Talk to your teacher, but start trying to work it out with the school. It doesn't have to start as a fight. The next level up, if things can't be resolved at the school, or the district superintendent's office. There is a list of all of the district superintendent's offices up on the DOE website. I don't know if we were going to pop a link to that in here, but if you search, wonderful, thank you. The person at the superintendent's office that you want to talk to is actually probably not the superintendent, but the family support coordinator or the district family advocate. Those people, the district family advocate and the family support coordinator have been charged with working with and on behalf of families on exactly this sort of thing. If that doesn't work, you can also try your borough support organization. Yep, thank you. There's an administrator at each BCO, borough support organization, who, an administrator of special education. There, you can get information for them also on the DOE's website. I'm going to plug our fact sheet again. There's a box in there where a lot of these addresses that Liliana is sharing in the chat can all be found also if you don't manage to copy them all down today. If the BCO doesn't work, DOE Central has a office for special education. They actually oversee everything above this line in terms of the delivery of special education services. They have a dedicated mailbox, specialeducation@schools.nyc.gov, that gets read every day. You may not get your answer on the first day, but you will get an acknowledgement that they are looking into it and that they've got it. We've also given you the phone number for calling their offices. I would say, really work from the top down here. But when you hit walls, the next level should be able to help you. Organizations like ours exist because you're going to hit walls, unfortunately. So we're also here to help you. And I know we've given you our helpline number. We will remind you about that at the end. There's the link down there for finding your school superintendent and borough support organization. The contacts there are going to be really helpful and really valuable. Back to Liliana.
Back to me. Hello. So let's talk a little bit about problems with charter schools. Now, charter schools are public schools are independently run, but they still have to follow certain Department of Education requirements, such as following your special education program. So if you go into charter school and the charter school tells you that you need to waive your IEP, or you need to change the IEP, or you need to find a different school that's not the charter school, they're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to tell you to disregard your child's needs because they offer what they offer. So what you can do about it is to complain. You can call the Office of School Design and Charter Partnerships at the number I am just dropping in the chat box, or you can click on filing a complaint, the link that I just provided. But just remember, just because it is not available, that is no reason why your child should not receive a needed special education services, especially if it's mandated on the IEP, regardless of if you're in a public school, the typical traditional public school, or in a non-traditional public school like a charter school. Now, I'm just gonna plug a note to remember. If you need makeup services, remember what Maggie had spoken about before, about the Department of Education's new program for after school and Saturday programming to help students with IEPs, but also remember that these are not compensatory services. So if you missed services, if you missed instruction, if you need them, ask for them in writing, please. And then I think Maggie is back on with the next slide, where we're probably going to review some of what we already said, but I think it's important to remember certain pieces.
Yeah, I mean, these next two slides go over a lot of what both Liliana and I just said on the last several slides. But just sort of to get a little more sort of detailed, we wanted to give you a couple scenarios where you might be seeking some additional help, right? So if your school doesn't have what's called for on the IEP, your child requires an integrated co-teaching classroom or a SETS provider or specific related services, this is a good place to start with the school. You want to find out, A, is that correct, right? So how, where can you get more information? And B, are they working on it? And C, are they going to have it resolved tomorrow, or is this going to be a longer term problem? Even tomorrow, I know, is incredibly frustrating, but your approach is probably going to be a little different depending. If your school can't help, and you've sort of bumped up through those other levels that we showed you a couple of slides ago, calling the DOE special ed hotline it can be really helpful. Those are the folks that are overseeing what's happening in the schools and in the districts, and they're going to help work with your school to identify providers and appropriate classroom management to get there. If you need a change to your IEP, right, your student needs something that is actually not on the IEP, therefore your student isn't receiving those supports and services, you can ask for another IEP meeting. You don't have to wait. This is sort of like a really mini school rights lecture in 2 slides, right? You don't have to wait for your annual meeting, assuming your annual meeting actually happens. You can ask for an IEP meeting sooner, and you can discuss with the rest of the IEP team changes that you think are necessary to your child's IEP in order to make sure that they get all the support that they need in order to make progress in school currently. And then I just talked about if the schools can't offer the services, you're going to work with everything from 2 slides ago. If they can't ultimately offer those services, they're going to provide the related services authorizations, which are like vouchers that allow you to go get those related services somewhere else. One of the things that might happen in those after school and Saturday programs that we talked about before is related services may be offered there, right? Either from school staff or in coordination with authorized related services providers. We're still waiting for details on how that's going to work, but we will be watching that really, really closely. Okay. Here's our helpline number. I thought we'd given it to you earlier, but please do call our helpline if you need help. We're open from 10 to 4, Monday through Thursday. Even as we're working remotely, we are still checking those phones and answering your calls. The DOE Special Ed office, we're really plugging it today, right? These are some of the times that you can call them and that they might be helpful. No response to a referral. You think your child needs special ed services and they're not getting them yet. You've asked for an evaluation and nothing has happened. Or evaluations have been done and there was really something off about them, or they weren't done as thoroughly as you think they needed to be done. You need an IEP meeting and it's not being scheduled, or it keeps being delayed. You have an IEP that calls for a specific type of placement or supports and services, and that's not happening in the school. You haven't received a copy of your IEP. All of these are reasons to reach out to DOE Central and to reach out to us. So go ahead and make use of the various places that you can ask for help, both within and without or outside of the DOE. On the next slide, we give you some specific email addresses. So there are some questions that you know where you need to go to, and you may not need to go to that bigger the special education at schools.nyc.gov number. You can always still reach out to us on these, right? Call our helpline, there's our number again, but there is a dedicated email address for related services questions for those families that have students with disabilities that are moving from preschool to kindergarten to school age. They're special ed at charter schools, you can and should reach out to your CSE. For most of you, your CSE meetings are actually going to happen at your schools, but for students who are in non-public schools or in charter schools, those are going to happen at the CSE. And then there's a dedicated email address for specialized programs. Those are programs like ASD Nest, ACEs. There's a new pilot program in the Bronx about offering behavioral supports. There are a couple literacy support programs. So you can get more information about them from the DOE's website, and you can write to them. All right. I think maybe I'm handing this over to Liliana.
Yeah, this is,
yeah.
I think I'm back again. So hello. So before we get into final questions and answers, remember we have a follow-up question and answer webinar where there are things that may come up in the next week that you have not considered or you thought about after this webinar is over. We will have a follow-up webinar for questions and answers on September 27th at 4 in the afternoon. We'd love for you to join us. And then I think
Before you go on, actually, at that next Q&A, we'll also definitely share, you know, in all the places today that we've said we're waiting for information. If we have that information, we'll definitely offer updates from our end as well.
So that's true. There are things, of course, that as you've noticed, we don't have all the information because a lot of information is simply not available at this point. So we hope to have it available later on. We wish it were different, but here we are. Isabella, would you mind putting the last slide and and the last poll while we answer the remaining questions, if that's possible. We also want to hear how back to school is going, as Kim just reminded me. So if you join us in the webinar, you just want to tell us how things are going, then that's fantastic. There is an open question that I wanted to answer, and this just is a few reminders, you know, please, like if you need information, if you need help, if you want to let us know how it's going, get in touch with us. And I think that probably that link is wrong about the COVID updates, but just go out to our website, Advocates for Children. That's the right slide. advocatesforchildren.org. We will have back to school updates pretty prominently displayed. So you can also click on Maggie's fabulous back to school fact sheet, which has a question and answer format, and would be able to answer most of your questions. But of course, join us later. And then Isabella, if you could please launch the final poll, and then let me just look at one of the questions that we had, which was regarding Section 504. So a parent answered how they can get a Section 504 program for their child. And I included in the response just a link to the Department of Education's landing page that includes all the information that would be needed. But to sum it up, you need to have a health provider, a physician, a registered nurse, fill out an accommodation, a request for a Section 504 accommodations form, and submit it both to both forms, the accommodations and the HIPAA form, to your school's Section 504 coordinator. Every school has somebody who is assigned to review and collect information on Section 504. It is done different from special education. You have to submit the paperwork, you have to submit the application, and it is not automatically renewed. Every year you have to submit your Section 504 medical accommodation form. For those of you who do not know what Section 504 is, it's a way for students who require specific accommodations to be able to participate fully in schools to be able to receive those accommodations. So for example, if your child has asthma and requires has to carry their asthma pump, this allows them to do so. If they have dietary restrictions or allergies, a Section 504 will provide the necessary accommodations so that they can go to school safely and not be exposed to allergens or to the things that they're not able to be exposed to. These are just simple examples, but there are other accommodations that are available under Section 504.
Can I jump back in?
Go ahead.
So a couple things, a note to us internally that link on about the updates is still good. Also on there, you can get that fact sheet. The fact sheet, just to be clear, is about the start of the school year for students with disabilities specifically. It's up in English now, and we are working quickly to get it up there in Spanish and Chinese as well. And then I also see that there is a question about assistive technology. So assistive technology is available to students who require individualized technology to support them in their school experience. It can mean a whole lot of things. It's not a compensatory service. It is a, and I'm not really sure, Jacqueline, oh, it looks like Liliana is going to answer it live, but oh, okay.
You are.
Oh, okay. But it is, if your child can use assistive technology, low tech to high tech, in order to help them in school, then it is something that they do have a right to. And we have a lot of information about that up on our website. So take a look at all of that. It can be really, really beneficial. There's assistive technology, for those of you who don't know this, which is individualized. And then there is instructional technology, which is sort of the bigger technology that all of the students are using. For some students, the assistive technology now looks more like the instructional technology than it once did. Technology is moving fast, right? So, but it may mean that a student has a communication device or an individual iPad to help them with reading or any sort of thing. I'm not really sure how it would be used in the comp services context, unless the question is that the student should have had it previously and was never offered it. I think the solution for that would be to offer it now. It's a little bit different than makeup services. And yes, I do believe we will be sharing these slides.
Yes, and so if you want any service to be added on your child's IEP, yes, you would typically have to request a new IEP meeting because this is done as a process. And of course, try to request an evaluation to look into assistive technology and other services that you might want to include in the IEP. And then once you get all that information, you have your meeting, hopefully it's recommended. This has been a particularly quiet bunch. We're not used to having such a quiet group. So we hope that the information that we offered was of use. Please join us at the next webinar. And we should do the last slide, which is our thank you slide. Thank you. Stay safe. And please don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions or you need any information. We're here for you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Maggie, Kim. Thank you, Isabella.